Thank you very much, Councilman Garola. And I completely understand that as local elected officials, this is very challenging, because if anybody who walked those neighborhoods and see how families are impacted for something so basic like having water run through their homes, to flush a toilet, to take a shower, to cook food, it really hits at the very core of what we feel every Californian should have. We've done a lot of legislation trying to realize the goal of ensuring every California has safe and drinking water, but we realize it's much harder than just passing some policy, passing some legislation. On the ground, like in East Porterville, we understand it's very difficult, and I think we're having this hearing today because we said everyone should care about East Porterville, because today it's East Porterville, tomorrow might be many other communities and other assembly members, other senators, districts that are facing the exact same thing that we're talking about here today. So I know it's challenging, but your testimony is trying to inform us what could we do better through our state agencies as legislators, and as they roll out regulations and applications for the water bond, and $520 million was for safe and clean drinking water. There was millions more for recycled water. How do we prioritize communities that are facing the worst of crisis during these times, to be able to benefit from some of those funds that the voters made available for this very type of a situation that we're talking about here today? But I know we're talking about the short term, some of the water bottle and other solutions that are being done by many of these great community groups, but we're also talking about what are the long-term solutions. And I know in East Porterville and in the city of Porterville, there's been discussions in the past about connecting not only water lines to Porterville's main water system, but also the sewage aspect is another critical part that we can't ignore either. What's happening? You guys formed a task force. What is happening on the local level in terms of discussions of those long-term solutions? I know some of that had involved. Do you annex East Porterville? Do you not? Can you just service them? There's many agencies that are involved, and as you indicated, permits and CEQA requirements that local governments have to go through. But I think residents are here we're having a hearing in Sacramento. I think the residents are saying, what's the roadmap? How do we get there in the next, what's going to happen in the next year? What's going to happen in the next 2 years? People want to know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, that we're all moving, though we all know dealing with these water challenges takes time, at least the long-term solutions. But they want to know what's going to happen over the next year or 2 years, 3 years, in terms of moving towards this goal of finding a permanent solution for East Porterville. So, anybody from the county or the city?
I think one thing that's very obvious to me is that we have a lot of disadvantaged communities who are located at the city limits of incorporated cities. And there are main lines that run by their properties that could be hooked up in the future to provide water and sewer. But the problem we have is that the cities need to have a reason to hook them up. Besides being a philanthropist, they need to get something back for their residents who have made all the investments in that infrastructure. So it's like East Porterville, we need to provide excess capacity for water, potable water, not only just enough for that East Porterville group, but you have to have a benefit, a plus benefit for the city to service even more people with that well. So there's got to be a benefit to the cities to motivate them to step in and help, because why would you take on an additional burden with limited assets? And especially during the times that we're in, we don't know what the future provides as far as precipitation in the next 5 years. So they're really taking a risk, and those cities or CSDs or whoever has the water systems need to get some cushion to take in those disadvantaged communities.
City of Porterville, would you like to respond? Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, and that's why we're asking for the wells, is so that we can have that ability to move the water through to some of the residents in East Porterville. we don't think that we can do it all. We can do it in slices of areas and move that forward. Right now, we're pushing for the sphere of influence to go out further. That's going through the process right now. Should be going to the Board of Supervisors, and then we can at least start looking at that.
And I would just add that in regard to sewer for the East Porterville, they are already on a community-wide sewer collection system, and they lift that to the City of Porterville's wastewater treatment facility. So the community is sewered. As far as Porterville, the City of Porterville servicing an area that they don't annex, that is a viable option. As Councilwoman Garola mentioned, they're going through the process of updating their general plan to extend out their sphere of influence. Once that's complete, what LAFCO requires is an extraterritorial service agreement. We have another community called Cameron Creek, which I believe Paul Boyer talked about a little bit. It's outside the city of Farmersville. They were private wells. Basically, the individual property owners enter into an agreement with the city saying we will receive water service from you. It can be included as part of what would be required to sign up for service, and then that takes care of the LAFCO extraterritorial issues. If the city wanted to annex, that's something that we would have to work through as well. My understanding is that the residents out there don't want to be annexed, and my understanding from the city is that they're not really interested in annexing the area either. So,
okay. Mayor Stowe, then we'll have a question by Councilmember Dolly.
Okay,
Chairman.
thank you. As Supervisor Ishida said, we do need something. We can't put put the stress on our water supply for our citizens, and we can drill wells, as I mentioned, but when you start putting that straw in the same glass, when the farmers, because they get, they're low, and their wells are low, and they're going to go deeper, and when, other cities and surrounding cities around us and outside areas of influence in greater areas of Porterville, everyone started digging their wells deeper, and we're not going to get any rain, and it's projected from National Weather Service the next 7 years we're going to be in drought. So that's the reason I think we have to do something such as the treatment plants so we can recycle water and we can save and treatment plant, one small treatment plant alone within the city of Porterville, we can save like 2 million gallons a month. And that would be, and we use that water for, and that leaves us for drinking water and service water, the other millions that we have. So we have to do something, and I think, we have to look at solutions, and resolutions for long term in order to make this happen, because we're going to be in trouble for many years to come.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Dolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to just say I'm sorry for missing about 10 minutes of this meeting. It's a very important issue. And as a member of the Assembly, I did serve 16 years on a Board of Supervisors and went through the LAFCO process more times than I care to talk about. But I would like to say to you that, I've heard the testimonies today, and I have compassion for the issues that you're faced with in your communities. But for me, what would be helpful is, has a state of emergency been declared? Is there, what would help, I think, the legislature is the county, the city, the residents come up with a solution that says this is our plan. This is what we think we can, and look, nobody's perfect in that analogy, but you don't know what's in the ground, but this is what we think we can do for the short term and for a long-term solution. And then that's something that I think the chairman and myself then could go to work on and try to provide whatever assistance that the state has available to it under the circumstances of the water bond, or what pot of money, or some relief in maybe legislation that would help you get through the annex or the sphere of influence, or whatever it is, that the hurdle that you seem to have that would bring those communities together. So if there's a possibility that you can get together and bring some sort of a plan to us that says this is where we think we could benefit the residents today and then into the future, I think that would be very helpful, at least for myself, and I'm assuming the rest of the members that serve on this committee.
Thank you. Anybody care to respond to that before we move on?
No, we need something.
Go ahead.
I think we do have some preliminary ideas. I sort of described them a little bit, that being a new well to fill the tanks for the very short near term, a new well to service the 100 or so residences that are along an existing water main, and then that longer term, that one would take a little bit more massaging to really figure out what it would take to get out into the entire community. But I think certainly everyone at the table and all that have testified today are willing to come to the table together and work through that.
And also, I think the CEQA process, to expedite that is the most important, because, you know, that's going to take at least 2 or 3 months, and by that time, we're right in the middle of the summer with no water. If we can get that well drilled now, we can get water to them, you know, and hopefully we'd be okay during the summer.
Yeah.
Right now, the state is the only one that can have an exemption to that. Local agencies don't. So that's where we get the hookup.
And I know with past governors, sometimes during the emergency declarations, there's been some exemptions done to deal with some of these CEQA issues, to do with trying to expedite the process through this emergency. So there's like precedent that we should be certainly looking at as well. And just to end, one was just a concern, which is even in finding the solutions, is making sure, you know, when you reach a solution, how do you maintain the water rates? You know, because, you know, of course, local governments try to recoup cost that they take to invest in finding a solution. But then, how do you make sure that water remains affordable? Sometimes in the examples like East Porterville, where people have the least to be able to afford an increase in their water rates. If you could just comment on that as well, because that's certainly going to be part of the ongoing discussion as we try to find solutions.
Certainly. Currently, we have the lowest water rates in Tulare County in Porterville. I mean, they are very low, and in fact, they're so low we're looking to increase it, you know, and by much, maybe $5.80 a month. And currently, it was like, correct me if I'm wrong, 72 cents per 1,000 gallons, or and that's little of nothing, you know, for our residents. And it's so low that, you know, our infrastructure, and we can't even get a bond on it, because we have no way to repay it, because we don't generate enough revenue to repay that. So I don't think the rates are going to be, you know, astronomical, where the East Porterville residents can't afford it. But the problem is that we don't have the water to give to them.
Yeah.
And I would just add to that that is one of the reasons why the county is supportive and has been pursuing a connection to the city of Porterville, because you get that economies of scale that you don't get in a smaller system, which help reduce costs. The other item is that you know, the state board through their programs has offered loans for the infrastructure, and unfortunately the community is so severely disadvantaged that they really couldn't probably repay that capital investment. It would need to be mostly grant funded.
And my last comment was just regarding, you know, the issue that was raised by some of the previous groups, that, you know, there still seems to be a significant number of residents who are not utilizing the services that are available for, you know, drinking water, but also even some of the water that is made available, you know, that it's only, you know, it's only appropriate for use for limited purposes, like flushing toilets and other other uses. How can we perhaps better communicate that, perhaps to many of the residents who are Spanish speaking? You know, how do we better communicate the appropriate uses of water and the water services that are available for them?
I'm going to just say that it really takes a face-to-face. Individuals don't understand the process, understand what forms need to be done, and sometimes they're just weary of whether they should do this or not. And so the survey, when we did that 200, people came out and spoke to us. We either spoke in the language or in English, whichever language that they needed, but we were able to get the information that was needed for that survey. I felt that if we continued that throughout East Porterville, we could have gotten a better grip on what was really going on, what was the wells. As I said, Paul Boyer went out with us, and he was able to look at some of those wells and see whether they were actually having problems. But you get a very good glimpse of what's happening, but you also get to have that communication. And I think that's important when you're going to do something with a disadvantaged community.
Thank you very much. We got Office of Emergency Services. If you guys could make your presentation, then we'll have some questions for you as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman Aleo. Vice Chairman Dahl, for inviting us here today. Look forward to having the opportunity to highlight some of the work we've been doing with Tulare County and the City of Porterville to help address this situation. I'm joined today by my colleague Charles Robamad, Assistant Director for the Cal OES Recovery Division. We both had the opportunity to travel to Tulare County and to East Porterville on several occasions. And although those opportunities gave us tremendous insight into the challenges and struggles, I think we would both agree that hearing from many of these residents, some of whom we'd met before, many of whom we had not, is tremendously valuable as we continue to help facilitate providing whatever support we can to local government. So I just want to, on behalf of OES, thank the residents for making the trip up here today. Together with our regional response and disaster recovery teams, we've been charged with supporting the Tulare County Office of Emergency Services and its many community partners as we work together to get water to the individuals who are experiencing dry wells. Currently, statewide, there's nearly 1,800 dry wells that have been reported throughout California. As you so eloquently heard already, Tulare County residents have taken the hardest hit with more than 900 of those dry wells. At Cal OES, our job is, under the governor's authority, the state of emergency, is to pull together the state agencies anytime we're faced with a challenge to expedite the delivery of emergency resources, in this case to help Tulare County OES and its nonprofit partners work together to tackle the challenge of getting water to residents. In September, the governor authorized us to use the California Disaster Assistance Act and the funds within that act to help support local programs to get residents water for drinking and sanitation purposes. Already, Cal OES has reimbursed Tulare County's nonprofit partners, self-help enterprises, and the United Way over $1.2 million. In total, we've given Tulare County the green light to proceed on a nearly $11 million program, many aspects of which you've heard about today, to make sure water is available for the more than 900 households countywide. While we work collaboratively with the county and its nonprofit partners to continue to set up the household tank program, Tulare County OES has undertaken an effort to ensure water is available for all households. As you've heard, there's a bottled water program funded through the State Water Board that's helping many homeowners. We're prepared to support, if necessary, expansion of that program through CDAA if that's an avenue that the county decides they want to take. The county has sent many corporate donations, some of which we've helped facilitate through OES, to the local partners, the church and other volunteers in East Porterville to hand out to residents, many of whom, as you've heard, are reluctant to come forward for the bottled water program. There are 2 tanks that the county's set up that Denise alluded to. Folks are able to get sanitation water, and the county's set up the shower facilities as well. As I indicated, these actions have occurred while we continue to work with the county to set up portable water tanks in as many yards as possible, several of which are already in place. Last week, we had a very successful 2-hour meeting where we brought together county and city staff to talk through what a council member spoke to a moment ago, the need for more wells to support the city of Porterville. Following a very extensive dialogue, the following day, Charles was able to give Tulare County the authorization to move forward immediately on a well that will help support the household tank program. As the tanks are being installed, we'll have a water source. I personally committed to continuing to bring that group together to look at additional wells that may be needed to support the connection that you've heard about today. So we'll be continuing that dialogue in the weeks to come. Over the past year, Cal OES has coordinated the state response to countless local emergencies where water systems have failed or were nearing failure and residential wells have run dry. And although these drought conditions are likely to persist throughout 2015 and most definitely longer, we know that the work we're undertaking to help Tulare County will enhance our ability to problem solve the challenges ahead of us in many other communities across the state. In conclusion, I'd like to acknowledge the leadership of the Tulare County Board of Supervisors, the Porterville City Council, the Porterville Area Coordinating Council, the Tulare County Community Volunteers and Nonprofit Organizations, and the Tulare County Office of Emergency Services, all these community leaders, volunteers, county staff have come together to work together to address this unprecedented emergency and strive to do everything they can to help the people of Tulare County. And we're certainly appreciative of those efforts as we continue to provide whatever support we can from the state side. With that, we're happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much. Did you want to make any comments, sir?
Yeah, good afternoon, Chairman and Assembly members. I just want to assure you that in my recovery team is doing everything we can to expedite the process, streamline it, and find a solution, things outside of the box to make things happen, coordinate, collaborate with the county, the city, and the local private nonprofit organization. So we're ready to do anything we can to get things done, and hopefully we can resolve the drought issue up there.
Thank you very much. And certainly the purpose of this hearing is, I think if we shed light on what's happening in East Porterville, I think it conveys to the people of Porterville that this is important to the legislature. It's important for us to find solutions, but also to encourage the local, county, the state agencies to continue to collaborate to find solutions and have a collaborative atmosphere, because I think more is going to get done, and we're going to have be more effective when we see that happening. So it's not just to have a hearing, but it's our commitment to shed light on what's happening, but also do the follow through and making sure we're having continued conversations month after month to keep making progress towards the solutions that I think that the people are hoping are not too far away. But the governor did issue millions of dollars for drought relief, emergency drought relief last year. We're going to have a discussion when we look at the budget again in June about additional dollars for drought relief. So just for OES, my question was, how has that drought relief been tapped statewide, and how could we perhaps be more helpful to these local efforts in East Porterville?
Well, I know the administration is looking through its proposed budget at the programs the governor authorized last year and which programs we need to extend. I know there's a tremendous amount of conversation about that, how we can use the water bond funding as well. The ability for us to use the California Disaster Assistance Act to provide drinking water and water for sanitation to folks is huge. We're working as best we can to move as quickly as we can to get funds, in some cases advanced out to the county and to the nonprofits so that they can do the work and not have to worry about cash flow situations. So we're continuing to stay on top of that. To your point earlier, Chairman, of collaboration, that's something that we're certainly looking keenly at as we bring under our charge community groups, county, city staff together, because we don't want it in any community to be residents received their water from this group or from this governmental entity, but rather that they received water, and it really doesn't matter at the end of the day who gets the credit for it, and that's certainly something that we'll continue to try to foster as best we can.
Right, and the reason I asked that is that certainly when I was there visiting, and I went to Emmanuel Church and I visited, one of the tanks was at the tow yard, and it was the local sheriff deputies that were helping out, and then the local nonprofits, and I said, here we are, have millions in our state drinking water fund, millions more coming hopefully in our water bond, hopefully out very soon. We're the 7th largest economy in the world, just surpassed Brazil, but here there are poor residents who don't have water flowing through their homes. For me, that was a real sad statement that California could and should be doing better, and so we need to, that's what I immediately wanted to try to set up this hearing, to ask those questions. What can we be doing better? And as part of the Disaster Assistance Act relief, what's the process for locals applying for that funding, and then how do you determine, or how does the community prove or demonstrate the urgent need to get that funding?
Well, that's really what's tremendous about the governor's action. Normally this program is a post-disaster program. A fire has occurred, an earthquake's occurred, counties incurred response cost or has damaged infrastructure, and they come to the state seeking approval to use funds from CDA. In this case, the governor said, I'm authorizing CDAA to make sure that there's nothing to slow down local government's ability to address public health and safety needs and get water to individuals. So we've got the authorization. Charles has the ability, when necessary, to advance money to organizations like Self-Help and others that are doing work. So the program's in place, the authorization's there. Our task is to continue to bring folks together on a regular basis to talk through where are we today, what did we solve last week, and what do we need to do in the week ahead, and work to make sure that all the various state agencies are being as solutions-oriented as they can under the tremendous authority the governor's given us with the drought state of emergency to creatively help solve these problems. And it certainly does. It certainly does take time. But we are finding we are moving at a much faster pace than I've ever seen in my 22 years in government move. And so I've been very pleased with what we've seen thus far. But if you're one of the residents behind me that's out of water, there's so much more that we need to do, and we're committed to doing that.
Right, and that's all you want to hear is just a commitment to try to make things better, make them quicker, but there was a big issue that's not going away, which is these 40 to 50% of these rental units that perhaps don't qualify, and I don't want to leave here and saying, well, we know that's out there, but how do we address that? And so I know there's. If you go there, you'll see these homes that are very, these are very high. You've been there as well. It's highly economically disadvantaged part of Tulare County. Many of the landlords, they're not very well off either, but nonetheless, here's a significant portion of these homes that perhaps don't qualify now. What are going to be the solutions to be able to address those and provide relief for these homes that need these water storage tanks so they could have a short-term and then also a long-term solution down the road?
Chairman, I appreciate you asking the question. I know it's very important to all of us. As you've heard today, everybody's first priority is working together to make sure we're getting water to the residents, regardless of whether they rent or own. The county's got the bottled water program going. Local volunteers and the church are handing out water that we get from corporate donations. We've got the non-potable tanks that have been set up. We've got some tanks that are already being set up in East Porterville and in other areas in the county, and then the shower facilities. Our expectation when you look at the CDAA program, we can't support a business entity, and a landlord who's collecting rent is considered a business entity, has a responsibility to provide water. Our expectation is that landlord is going to carry out their responsibility. If they are able to set up a tank and get that plumbed into the house, we'll provide the water for it. There's no cost to the landlord or the resident to get water into that tank.
How much does that cost? How much would a tank and a pump to create the pressure within the home? How much would that cost the landlord?
I hate to punt to you, Denise, but I don't have that number handy. And I'm not sure Denise has it.
I'm looking at Paul for fingers. I think it's around 3,000.
And the reason I'm asking, these are real questions, right? Whether a landlord can afford $2,000 to $3,000, $4,000 to do this, and in the meantime, while their expectation may be that a landlord is going to provide that for their tenant, the reality is that many are not. And do we keep pointing fingers at the landlord, or do we try to find a solution for the renters?
Yeah, I apologize for cutting off. No, if we have a landlord step forward and demonstrate that to the county that they can't assume that responsibility, we're prepared to look at other options we may have within the state. CDAA is likely not going to be that option, but we haven't shut the door by any means to other options within state government that may be able to support the landlord. So, at this point, I think today our biggest challenge is getting that information, having those landlords come forward and demonstrate that they can't. We don't have that right now, and part of the reason is, as you've heard today, we're challenged with the information we receive. One of the commitments Charles and I have made is actually to provide bilingual staff to support the county and the nonprofits' efforts to start that dialogue with the residents and continue that dialogue to try to get the information we all need to be able to make smart decisions about how we move forward. But the administration by no means is shutting the door on the situation. Today, while we're here, there's folks looking at what are the solutions that might be available to a landlord that doesn't have the means, wants to do the right thing, but doesn't have the means to do it.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not just putting this on you. You know, I know you're doing important work, but it's on us as well, my staff and I and other legislators, to try to find these solutions. You know, and perhaps making a different exemption when it's this type of a unique and dire situation for these types of communities and these types of economically disadvantaged census areas, where we perhaps should be doing something a little bit differently than we do in other types of situations. So we have some questions from our colleagues here.
Actually, you asked the question that I was interested in, but I wanted to follow up on the chairman's question. Is there a program that makes available low-interest loans to apartment owners and business likes that could tap into those funds to put in these tanks and water systems that they desperately need?
You know, Vice Chairman Dahl, I apologize for not having the specifics. I have heard that in some of the briefings I've been in lately, that we are looking at some programs like that. Unfortunately, I don't have any specifics to offer you here today, but we can certainly follow up and let you know what's being looked at.